Get the kids. We are moving. And then we really did. Felipe, my husband, our 6 children, and 12 other Hispanic families moved from the Mora County, New Mexico, the place they had lived since 1626. We had cultivated the land there. We had lived our whole lives there, and with just 3 sentences, we left there. Felipe had been along the Santa Fe Trail, trading 4 wagons full of flour at a new settlement along Cherry Creek. And along his travels, he claimed that he had found a place where the soil was more rich and more fertile than any other place that he had ever been. He claimed that you could plow the ground with nothing more than a sunflower stalk. And so we packed everything we owned into 20 wagons, all drawn by ox teams of 2, prayed to Our Lady Guadalupe, and then we were off. The trip was long and tedious. We traveled through the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, over Raccoon Pass. There were no roads or paths in this part of the mountains, only rocky trails. The wagons topped over and rolled more times than I could count. Clothes, pots, pans spilling out of them, oftentimes bringing the giant oxen down with them. We brought our livestock along with us, and they slowed us down so much to the point that at one point, Felipe said, "Why don't we go ahead and give the old buggers a blow on the head so we can eat the damn things?" Compared to the corn mush we had been eating, the pork was a delicacy. I do not remember how long we were on the trail for, but I remember the moment we arrived in the valley. I hopped off the wagon and took a deep breath in, smelling the fresh air rolling off the peaks. The Rockies were rising to the west, and the mesas were in the south. There was prairie land stretching seemingly on forever to my east. There was cedar and pinon trees dotting all of the hills, and water coursing through the rivers. It was like no place I had ever been before. Perhaps Felipe had been right to move our whole family here. It was a different life than we had led in the Mora County, for we were not the only ones to call this beautiful valley our home. The Utes, led by Chief Colorado, had lived in this valley for much longer than we had, and upon arrival to the valley, we had to bargain and trade as much as we could so that they would not kill off all of our livestock. Felipe made it his mission to be friendly with the Utes. Eventually, they taught us how to grow our corn, bean, and squash close together to maximize crop production, how to build our adobe bricks so that it would be stronger. Peace with the tribes became an expectation in our valley. I remember Felipe used to sit down at night and tell the children the story. He would always start the same way as they clamored around his feet. "When I was just a young boy, I worked for my uncle. I would walk from the New Mexico territory all the way to Chihuahua, Mexico to bring the livestock back and forth. Most days, I had nothing more to eat than just corn mush. On one of my travels, I met an older Indian woman who took pity on me. She told me that if I would pick up her firewood, she would give me food. And so, on every trip that I made after that, I would stop by her lodge, pick up her firewood, and she would give me warm tortillas. On my last trip that I ever made, I stopped by her lodge one last time, and I picked up her firewood, but instead of the warm tortillas, this time she gave me a single calf and a statue of Our Lady Guadalupe. That calf is the calf that started the herds that now feed you. And that statue of Our Lady Guadalupe has never not gone with me somewhere and brought me luck. Do not ever dismiss others, for you never know the kind of impact they will have on you." Word of Felipe's leadership and the kindness our family was known for spread throughout the valley. The Utes became our friends. After 6 years of calling this beautiful valley our home, Felipe and I decided to donate 40 acres of land so that it may become a real town. It was decided that the town be called Trinidad, per our request. In our religion, it represents the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. While we were not in charge of the town, our voices were heard largely throughout the community. We built a corner store and donated land for the first Catholic church to be built. Felipe even served as the president of the school board for 2 years. It is one of my greatest joys to say that I got to see Trinidad grow from the first 12 of us who came and built our houses along the river to the town flourishing in the mountains that it is today. 4 years after Trinidad became a real town, in 1870, Felipe was asked to serve as the Republican representative for the Colorado Territorial Legislative that eventually went on to make Colorado a state. Our neighbors, mostly Mexicanos, believed that if Colorado were to become a state, us Spanish-speaking people would not be represented well by an English-speaking government. And so, Felipe fought to ensure that we, as a people, were represented. It was eventually decided that the Colorado Constitution be written in Espanol as well as English and German. Looking back on it now, it does not seem to be that big of a deal, the Constitution being written in 3 languages instead of 1. But when I look at that stack of papers, I feel a swell of pride, not only for my husband, but my people and my culture. A culture that has survived so much. My grandparents immigrated here in 1626 when the King of Spain granted them the land in the New Mexico territory after my grandfather dug one of the first canals in Spain. They raised me in the New Mexico territory to speak not 1 but 2 languages. They raised me in the New Mexico territory to live in not 1 culture but 2 cultures. And so when I look at that Constitution, I see them there. Mi abuelo y abuelita, my grandparents, their language screaming loud and proud. That Constitution ensures that my children and the children of my neighbors will never live in a place where their culture is not represented, where their culture is forgotten. A year before Felipe passed, we bought a house together. We traded 22,000 pounds of wool for it. It was adobe like our old house, but it was unusual. It had 2 stories instead of 1, a widow's walk, Rio Grande textiles, and Greek architectural details. The businessman who built it did not need it anymore as he was moving along the Santa Fe Trail. Felipe liked to joke that we didn't even lose anything for it because the sheep would always grow their wool back the next year. That house became my pride and joy. 9 children running around, food to be made, businesses to be handled after he passed. There is not a quiet moment in our casa. It is a beautiful place to live, even now. Even though he is gone, his memories live within the walls. Felipe passed much too early. Our daughter, Apollonia, was married, and we had danced the night away at her wedding, and then the next he was gone, and no one could tell me why. In his will that he had written only weeks prior, he had left me guardianship of our 3 youngest children, Felix, Luis, and Facundo, my baby, only 4 years old when his papa died. I made it my duty to ensure that my children would have an education and grow up to be as successful, or even more successful, than their father was. Our daughter, Maria, became a nun, a high honor in our family. Felix and Luis both attended Notre Dame and became a civil engineer and a county judge for the Los Animas County. And Facundo, my baby, is well along his way to becoming a physician. For all that Felipe and I did for Trinidad and this county, I believe that our children are the biggest blessings of all. They will not only continue to shape this beautiful state, but share God's light and show others the ability to exist as someone who looks and speaks differently than others. They never cease to amaze me with their abilities. Raising them to be who they are today is the thing that I am most proud of. Felipe never got to see our household thrive. He never got to see 3 of his children grow up in the house that we bought together. He never got to see his beloved territory grow into a state that has more than one kind of people living in it. Trinidad and that town and those people in that area were the greatest joys of our life for so long. And so I am here today to thank you for recognizing the work that we put into the people of this state and that town. He would have been so honored to know that you decided to name a county after him. His story, our story, which is the story of so many immigrants like us, will continue to live on through this name. the Baca County. Gracias and buenos dias.